What if the most criticized generation in America is also the most psychologically exhausted? Studies show millennials report significantly higher anxiety levels than previous generations at the same age. They are called lazy, entitled, too sensitive, not resilient enough. They killed industries. They ruined traditions. They complain too much. But what if they didn't break adulthood? What if adulthood broke first? And here's the real question. What happens when you raise an entire generation to believe effort guarantees success, and then remove the reward? Stay with me, because the answer might change how you see not just millennials, but the future itself. Millennials grew up during peak optimism. Parents said, "Follow your passion. College is the safest investment. Hard work always pays off." This wasn't advice. It became identity. Then reality intervened. September 11th reshaped national security and fear. Wars redefined economic priorities. The 2008 financial crisis destroyed early careers. Student debt exploded past $1.7 trillion. Housing costs outpaced wages in many major cities. According to Pew Research, millennials became the most educated generation in U.S. history, yet wealth accumulation lagged behind previous generations at the same age. What does that do to a brain raised on promises? It creates expectation collapse. When effort stops correlating with reward, the nervous system interprets life as unstable, and instability breeds anxiety. Older generations say, "We struggled too." And they did, but struggle changed shape. Boomers faced inflation, but affordable housing. Gen X faced layoffs, but lower tuition costs. Millennials faced simultaneous instability in every core system: jobs, housing, healthcare, education. So when millennials hear, "Just work harder," they don't hear advice. They hear, "You are failing at a system that worked for us." What if millennials aren't rejecting hard work, but rejecting rules that no longer produce results? This is where misunderstanding turns into conflict. Older generations see fragility. Millennials feel unseen, and resentment grows quietly on both sides. The World Health Organization recognized burnout as an occupational phenomenon. Millennials didn't invent burnout, they exposed it. Surveys consistently show higher reports of workplace stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion among millennials. Why? Because they were taught success equals identity. When work becomes identity, instability becomes existential, not just financial, psychological. If your worth depends on achievement, what happens when achievement becomes unpredictable? This is why therapy became normalized. Not weakness, adaptation. Previous generations survived by suppressing emotion. Millennials survived by naming it. They introduced mainstream conversations about boundaries, trauma cycles, emotional intelligence, mental health days. Some critics call this oversensitivity. Others call it evolution. As Brené Brown explains, vulnerability is not fragility. It's courage under uncertainty. Millennials didn't remove strength, they redefined it. Is emotional awareness making society softer, or finally honest? Marriage later, children later, home ownership later. The stereotype, "they don't want responsibility," the psychological reality, they learned caution from instability. Data shows millennials spend a higher proportion of income on housing compared to previous generations at similar ages. What if millennials aren't delaying adulthood, but adulthood itself became delayed. Millennials fight capitalism while ordering food through 3 different apps. They say they're exhausted, yet somehow know every meme trend. They cancel plans for mental health, and honestly, sometimes that's just survival mode. Humor is how exhausted people stay functional. Millennial parents often say, "My child will never struggle like I did." They talk openly about feelings, apologize to children, encourage individuality, reject authoritarian parenting. They are trying to break generational cycles, and that is revolutionary. But here's the uncomfortable question. If you remove every obstacle, do you remove resilience? Are millennials healing trauma or unintentionally creating new fragility? Millennials were told, "You're special." Then, "You're entitled." They were told, "Dream big." Then, "That's unrealistic." They were told, "Change the world." Then, "Stop complaining." That contradiction creates identity tension. As Simon Sinek noted, millennials didn't design the systems they struggle in. They inherited them. How do you succeed in rules that keep changing? Millennials are tired of being told they are the problem because many feel like they inherited climate anxiety, economic instability, political polarization. They are not simply surviving adulthood, they are redesigning it while living inside it. And that is psychologically exhausting. They accelerated remote work, they normalized therapy, they built digital communities. They challenge outdated systems, not because they reject tradition, but because tradition stopped protecting them. Adaptation is intelligence, and millennials adapted. But here's the question history hasn't answered yet. Are millennials raising the most emotionally intelligent generation or the least resilient one? Are they healing cycles or overcorrecting them? Are they building a stronger future or unknowingly making adulthood harder for their children? We don't know, and maybe that uncertainty is the true legacy of millennials. If this made you think, subscribe, because understanding generations isn't about blame. It's about understanding the psychological forces shaping our future. Be honest, are millennials misunderstood, or are they redefining adulthood because the old version failed? And if you're a millennial, what is one thing older generations still completely misunderstand about you? Write it below. Let's make this real.